So our next speakers are Élise and Basque and Christine Brodeur, and they are colleagues at Polytechnique Montréal. And Élise and Christine are science and engineering librarians. And I'm actually not sure which of you may be starting or who will be sharing a screen, but I'll just pass things over to you just so that you can get started. And welcome.
Christine, you do it right. It's perfect. Great.
Yep. So hello, everyone. Thank you very much, Shannon. I'm Élise and Basque. Christine will be sharing her screen, so just waiting. Yeah, okay. So thank you for staying connected until the end of the day for our presentation, Building Faculty Relationships Through Innovative Bibliometric Services, in which my colleague Christine and I will present and discuss 3 requests we received in the last year from professors of a department of our university. We work at Polytechnique Montréal, an engineering university affiliated to Université de Montréal. At the moment, there are 284 professors in 7 departments specializing in various engineering fields. I would say we are a medium-sized university with lots of research. The library offers a variety of bibliometric services on demand, but doesn't have a formal service offer in bibliometrics. There are 6 reference librarians apart from the managers, and 2 of the reference librarians performing bibliometric analyses at the moment. That would be Christine and I, obviously. We have a variety of tasks, and bibliometrics represent maybe 15 to 20% of what the both of us do. The main database that we use is Web of Science. We don't have Scopus, Insights, or Scival. We sometimes used Compendex in the past, which is the main engineering database, but it didn't really have important bibliometrics functionalities, such as affiliations control, until recently when Scopus affiliations were integrated, since Compendex is an Elsevier product. We were really happy to see that, and we're definitely going to use it in answering future requests. You'll see in the 3 projects that we're presenting today how we used the different databases, Compendex and Web of Science mostly. I assure you that we work in a very serious institution, but since it's the last presentation of the day and we needed to anonymize everything we are going to present today, we thought we might do something a little lively, and so we present to you the work we did for the Department of Fun Engineering. Of course, this doesn't exist for real. It's just for this presentation. We might also be talking about their great research in various themes of this fun imaginary world. I also want to specify that we won't get into too many technical details. Now let's get to our main content. A first professor contacted us with an unusual request, and it was the beginning of an interesting bibliometrical relationship with his department. He contacted the library because he was seeking an objective outsider's mapping of the research themes of his department in order to guide reflections about strategic development regarding professors' recruitment. This map would also be meant to help create informal research teams and strengthen collaborations inside the department. It was very important from the start that this was not going to be an evaluation or ranking of any sort. There would be no comparisons. For this reason, each professor's publications themes were to be analyzed separately, and then we would form groups. For instance, Prof A publishes 60% of his articles in rainbow engineering and 40% in dragon engineering. So this just talks about his own research. Our main challenge was to identify and choose the main research subjects to group professors. Our patron did not supply any guidance on this because the whole point was to see what we would come up with as outsiders. We first searched for all the publications of the Fun Engineering department in Web of Science. Then we kept the Web of Science categories with the most publications as the main themes for our groups. And we added other Web of Science categories related to the main ones so that most of the publications would be linked to one of the groups. We checked how many publications from each professor were in each theme and transformed the numbers in percentages for each professor. Then we determined in which themes each professor publishes the most and in which proportions. This anonymized Excel sheet gives you an overview of what we came up with and delivered to the professor who made the request. There's a line for each professor of the department, and note that there are only percentages to avoid any output comparisons. The professors could filter by color and see the possible teams that were formed around each theme. A list of the Web of Science categories for each theme was provided. For instance, magical animals included the study of magical animals as a whole, and then also the more specific study of dragons, unicorns, and centaurs. You see that there is a fun category, which obviously almost all the professors publish in, as it is the fun engineering department. That was a problem. The Web of Science categories were sometimes too broad and did not provide enough information. What Marisa presented earlier would have been useful to us here if it were in Web of Science at the time. I can't wait to see it included. In the meantime, our solution was to use Compendex, which has a more granular classification for all fields of engineering. The difficulty in using Compendex was that it was harder to search by affiliation and department, especially since this was before the Scopus affiliation information was integrated in the database. So we did an author search for each professor in Compendex. We put all the publications together and then established new group categories based on the Compendex classification indices related to the fun engineering department. Finally, we determined again in which categories each professor publishes the most and in which proportions. We then had another Excel sheet to give to our patron with more detailed categories and a different portrait because of the more specific classifications of Compendex. You see here the details of dragons, unicorns, and centaurs, which were all under magical animals in Web of Science. The result is that there are some interesting groups, but also groups with one or two professors only. So this is really complementary to the other Excel sheet. The results were presented at a departmental assembly, which obviously must have been a lot of fun. It was reported to us that they became the starting point of several discussions. From the data we delivered them, each professor could have a portrait of how their own publications are categorized in the databases, and all the professors could develop new collaborations amongst themselves and identify gaps in research subjects in order to help target researchers for hiring, at a time where Polytechnique plans to hire a lot of new professors. These are all elements that can help shape some aspects of the department's future. The second request arrived a couple of months later, and the professor thought he would ask for our help following what was presented at his departmental assembly. In order to feed reflections on recruitment strategy, he wanted to position on a graph the articles of competing research groups. He wanted to know if these groups were doing mostly modelizations or experimental research, and if they were more focused on process or performance. We tried to do some automated keywords analyses from the abstracts of the articles of those research groups, but since the keywords were a bit general, the results were not that good. We could have pursued the work further, but it would have been a lot of work, and the professor ended up telling us that what he really wanted was a list of articles, links, and abstracts from specific competing labs, and then he would do the classification himself. So we provided the file in a format from which the articles could be easily classified and put in the graph. This work was not entirely bibliometrical, but it led to one happy patron who could then work easily on his recruitment strategy.
Thank you very much, Élise. So on with the third request. So a different professor from the same department wrote to the library. He was wondering if we could help him to understand or to analyze if the professor from the fun engineering department were collaborating together. So he wrote to the library. So our first step, actually, I didn't write it there, but was to actually meet with him. So we met virtually. This was the pandemic already. So we met with him to make sure that we understood what he wanted. As Chris said this morning, sometimes we're not sure what the patron wants. They're not sure always all the time themselves. So anyway, we discussed a bit with him, and he wasn't 100% sure, but he definitely wanted to focus on the internal collaboration within the fund engineering department. So the first thing that we did was to export the department's publication from Web of Science to Excel. And as Élise said, we had kind of already done that. So that was almost a year later, so we had to redo it, but we knew how the publication were in Web of Science. So we did not have to, like the search was much more easier, which is one of the advantage to develop a relationship like that with a specific department. Then we did a name match with the current professor and the author list from each of the article to find out how many of the current professors are working or were author for each of the article. The patron understood that this was an automated process and there could be some false positive and from some names that we would not find because of typos or something like that. And he was happy with that. So it was clear that he wanted a big picture. So he did not care about like each article individually. The first graph, the first results that we presented him was this one here. So I want to point out the orange line there. So it's around 60% for each year. So we did that for the last 10 years. And basically that orange line here is that there is only one current professor from that department. This was, I would say, quite a shock for him. So I think he thought there would be more, so that the percentage which would be lower, basically, because there would be more that were 2, 3, or 4 prof from the department. So we dig further, we went further. Before I say what we did to kind of explore that specific line here, that orange line, I want to point out the pale blue line down here, which is actually 0 professor. So that was kind of a strange find as well. We're like, okay, there is a mention. So we did find the mention of the fund engineering department in the affiliation in Web of Science, but either it's a retired professor or it's just the graduate students that publish without their supervisor. So that was kind of interesting as well. And maybe he'll explore that a bit further, but we did not do it for this request here. So what we did do, we dig deeper and we told him that we could provide number of authors per articles, because obviously if there's more than one author, there is some form of collaboration. Is there collaboration with other departments from Polytechnique, with other institutions, and are they within Canada or at the international level? Sorry. So the next result we showed him was this one here. So this is the collaboration with other departments within Polytechnique. So it's not a huge matrix as Laura just showed us, but it's still, and it's doubled as well. But since it's smaller, it's easier to read, I think. So the fund engineering is actually pretty good at collaborating with other departments. If we see our games department, maybe they're not really cool and they're not really amazing either. Maybe they should work on that. But anyway, sometimes it's okay that some departments have less in common, and this is normal as well. So for the fund engineering department, he could see, yes, okay, we do have, like, there's not as much collaboration within the department as I thought, but there are some outside, still within Polytechnique, but outside. So he was very happy with that. We still dig deeper in that orange line, that's 60% there. So this table here just shows that. And basically, there was about 700 articles in the last 10 years. And we looked again with a name match with all the current professor. Is there other professor from Polytechnique? So either 1, 2, or 3. So it shows here that, yes, there are about 100 articles just out of those 700. So we really wanted to focus on those with one professor from the department. The rest was like, okay, it's a 0 or there is some collaboration. It was happy with that. So our next step was really to focus on that orange line there. Good. So our last step, the last result that we showed him was a global overview. As you can see here in that table here, we basically gave information for all the articles from the department. So that table would go down to about over 1,000 articles. We kept the unique ID, always good, because it's easier to come back to the original if we want more information, or if we want to check, like, if ever we get a place where it says, I don't know, 20 current professors, and we're like, okay, what's happening here? So we can go back to the initial information. We also kept the publication year because he asked for 10 years, but maybe he's going to change his mind and then he's going to decide, okay, I want to focus only on the last 5 years. So it's super easy to do. And again, all this was automated. So at some point, doing it for 10 years, doing it for 5 years, basically Excel does the work. So it's all the same for us. Then just how many authors? The next two columns here are the collaboration within the department. Just yes or no. So here, here it's possible to filter. So if he just wants to focus on the yeses or the no, so either way. And then how many current professor. The same thing at the level of the institution. And then we look at the international collaboration. So here we're just yes or no. So he did not want to focus so much on that. So Web of Science allows, it's possible with Web of Science to see which other country and have like specifics of that, but he was not interested in those details. So this was just directly from the analyze result tool from Web of Science. And then from the affiliation field in Web of Science, we looked at how many affiliations from Canada. Again, this could lead to some kind of some form of error. If there are some double affiliation, well, it's going to be counted more than once for the same person. But again, it would still give a big picture. And if there was something weird, we could go back to the source here to look, okay, what is happening with that specific sorry, with that specific article or that specific paper. So what we provided here, it was very granular. And after that, basically, he can get everything that he wants with the magic of pivot tables. So I love pivot tables. You can do almost anything you want once you have your initial data. So you can like a mix of filter and pivot tables. You can look, the table I showed before was made with a pivot table. So basically you have your total, you can go by years. So you can do many things. You can focus on, like initially you wanted the internal collaboration, but here you can say, okay, finally I'll look at the international collaboration and does it have collaboration within Polytechnique after that? So he could decide to kind of go the other way around. So that was quite interesting. Also, with this table, we found out that, you remember, initially, it was kind of shocked with that 60% that there was only one current professor. But if we remove, if we take into account the other type of collaboration here, it went down to about 20%, where it was really like there was no other type from here. So there was no other institution from Canada, no international collaboration, and no other prof from Poly. So basically, we think, because usually there's not that many articles with just one author, so we think that it's probably the professor with his or her graduate students. So it doesn't happen that often, and I think that's what you wanted to look at. Okay, how often is it that it's just a professor with his student? Like, how much are they kind of in their little bubbles? So the 20%, which was kind of much better for him. It's also information that is very granular, very specific. We know that, we know that SciVal Insight can provide some information about collaboration. We do not have access to these, let's say, expensive tools. It's still possible to do many analysis just with the basic of Web of Science. And also from the small demonstration we had from SciVal, from Hamed, who was there yesterday, I think, who talked to us. I don't think it went all the way to that level. So it stayed, I think there was like just national, international, and there was, I think, one other level, but it definitely did not go within the department here. Okay, so these columns here, we had to work for them. And I don't think, or maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, and maybe it's going to make us buy more expensive tools. But for now, we're doing it by ourselves, which we actually like. And lastly, so it's important to collaborate, even though there could be some kind of drawbacks, as Jeffrey talked about it yesterday. So it's the division of the credit after you collaborate, but there are also many benefits. So he mentioned some reference yesterday. I have a very recent one as well that show a correlation between collaboration and citation. So there is still some importance that is put on collaboration, and the professor knew it, which is probably why he wanted to look at the different types of collaboration within the department. It allows to have a clear view of the situation to stimulate intra-department collaboration. So this was also done with the first request that Élise talked about. So create, like, to stimulate, to show, to really like have the the factual information to say, hey, you and you're working basically in the same themes. Like, why are you not at least talking to each other? So maybe they won't actually write together, but hopefully it's going to stimulate these exchanges within the department. Initially, there was a focus on internal collaboration, but it led to look at other types of collaboration as well. And hopefully, like, we're not sure, like, we know they discussed it and that they found our findings very interesting, but we're not sure that if they were really used for recruiting new professors. So this is still up in the air. But like, these processes can take quite a long time as well in universities. So we were very happy. It was very fun to work with that department, but it gave us ideas. So it was interesting to be part of shaping their future, but it also gave us ideas about our future as a bibliometric service that we don't have yet, that eventually maybe we'll put into place, and how we want our expertise to be recognized. That bibliometric is not just used for evaluation. So we have 3 very specific examples here where there was absolutely no evaluation out of all of everything that we presented today. That we are an objective party, like we have no say on who get money or what's going to happen after that. It really shows the current state of collaboration, that the quantitative analysis, the factual information that we give will lead to discussion that can lead to decision afterward, as it was pointed out by Chris this morning as well. So overall, we want to become a partner for different projects across Polytechnique, with the recognition that bibliometric analysis can provide a new perspective and be beneficial in various ways. So thank you very much. Thank you to the BRIC committee as well. I received my nice gift, which is very soft. There was also chocolate in the gift that are not existing anymore. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christine. Yes, the chocolate never lasts that long, right? And Élise, there's actually a question which I believe is directed to you from one of our listeners. And the question is, so you had to recategorize all of the publications using the more granular compendex categories. That must have been a lot of work. So was there an easy automated way to do this? Or really, what was your process for making that happen?
Yeah, we use the classification in compendex. So compendex already assigns the classification to all the articles. So we did not do everything again by hand. Yeah. So yeah, we searched for the publications by the professor's name in compendex, and then we looked at those classifications. But what we did do with using the compendex classification is look at how we could group them or how granular we want it to be, because compendex goes into much detail, and that was almost too much detail for us. So we did have to cut down the classification detail that we wanted to use.
Okay. And also a follow-up question is, how long did it take for you to do that kind of from start to finish?
Well, it was 3 requests. So the 3 requests were maybe over a year, but I'd say for the first request, I don't know, Kristen, if you can help me, but maybe 2 months for the first request. Professor gave us quite some time to
there were no rush, and the search in compendex, we had a stagiaire, like someone from, there's a library school not too far, and we employ some of their student for our reference desk, and he did some of the search for us as well, so that was very helpful.
Always a bonus.
So yeah, and so there was no rush on any of those, and which helps a lot, because then we had time to explore and see what the different options were. The second one was a bit quicker, because he kind of the person who had the request realized that, oh, okay, in the end, I basically wanted a list of abstract and journal and title, I think. So in the end, it was quite we explored a lot, and he's like, oh no, okay. And the last one, we started the first contact, what was in October, beginning of mid-October 2020. And the last meeting where we kind of gave him the last results and explained it to him was end of January, something like that.
Okay. And it is interesting, because so often I think everyone ends up in situations where a request is so urgent and it's so time sensitive, or as Jeff, I think, was mentioning yesterday, or Chris, maybe today, the data was wanted yesterday. So it's almost refreshing to hear about a project where the requester was maybe a bit more kind of laid back with just being okay with the exploring happening in order to get the end result.
Yeah, especially the first one had a few kind of deadlines. It's like, okay, we have a department meeting on that date, so hopefully you'll get some result by then. But it was not so much set into stone.
Again, very refreshing to hear. And I'm just keeping an eye on the time. So I think I'll have to thank both of you again and again. Hopefully you can join us at a future break. So everyone who is listening in, we are at the end of day 2. Just a few little quick comments before we sign off. Again, we really do appreciate those of you who have been sending in questions. We realize that this year's conference is a different experience, a different type of community to be part of. So again, thanks for sending in your questions. We definitely appreciate it. Just a reminder that as far as I know, all of these sessions will be available on the BRIC YouTube channel. So more to come on in regards to that post-conference. And again, we have one feedback form, which I know has been shared before. It's also on the BRIC webpage where all the program, the links to the different programs are at the bottom. And the last detail is tomorrow we move into day 3. And again, we start up at the same time, so 11 a.m. And yeah, I think that's it from us. So thank you again, and we hope to see you tomorrow morning. Have a good night.